Good afternoon, everyone. It has been a minute, hasn't it? We had a very, very busy holiday season, as did you, and we are super stoked to be back for Sprint TV. If you haven't seen any of our episodes in the past, basically the idea here is, let me take my headphones out because I don't need those. The idea here is that we want to give you tips and tricks to master your online presence. In modern retail, it is absolutely imperative that you have an online presence. And as the folks that are trying to bring that to you in the best way possible, we feel an obligation and deep desire to help you get there. If you were at the running event in Austin, which feels like it was a million years ago, we did our second in the SEO series on the floor at the show. And we had a lot of really great participants. Thank you guys for coming out. But I did want to kind of do the same thing here so that we had a recording of the session because a lot of folks got a lot from it. And also so that, people who weren't able to be there in person could still get a benefit from the presentation. So in our last episode 1, we discussed how search works, what SEO or search engine optimization is, and why this series is focused on blogging, good times, and your Google business profile. So blogging and your Google business profile, that's what this is about. I want to recap a couple of concepts here before we get into it. First, having a well-defined, professionally presented, and accurate online presence is the most important thing you can do for your run specialty business besides unlocking the doors at the beginning of the day. Why would I say something like that, guy who has the e-commerce business? Well, because 87% of your shoppers check your website and e-com before setting foot in your store. That's how it is. Think about it. Almost everybody looks online before going to a store unless they just happen to be in the area. And funny enough, if they happen to be in the area, they're probably still going to look online first. According to Google, 76% of people who do a local search from their phone, that means running store near me, visit a physical business within 24 hours. So if your website sucks, or if your e-commerce store takes forever to load, or it doesn't accurately represent what your customer can expect to see when they walk in your front door, you're shooting yourself in the foot. And if you don't think e-commerce matters in run specialty, you've already failed. Just because the direct revenue that your e-commerce store produces may only be 3 to 5% of your business, it doesn't mean that's the only return on your investment. As the statistics clearly show, everyone is looking online, and you'd better be there with your prettiest dress on when they do. So, how does it work? How do we optimize this? How do we make this work to our benefit? Well, Google is pretty much where everybody goes. And as a result, it's super important that when Google presents its results, you're as close to the top of that list as you can possibly get. And Google is king of the search engines because when you search there, you get more relevant results than you do with other search engines. And the art of getting to the top of that search results list is called SEO, or search engine optimization, which we've covered a little bit in the past, as you know. And it's complicated, which I've blabbered about in the past, as you know. But I'm going to give you the most direct way possible to improve your search rankings, help clarify what you should be trying to achieve, and it will only cost you your time and a little creative energy. Let me start with some context. Businesses spend an unfathomably huge amount of money paying SEO agencies to come in, run audits on their sites, tweak technical settings, all in an effort to improve SEO. And while these technical settings do matter, the results you get for the time and money you spend barely move the needle unless you already have stellar content. I bet most of you have paid agencies to come in, tell you your website sucks, offer to fix it for a nominal fee, and then once they're done, you sit back expecting your bank account to explode, but not much happens. Now, let me be clear, I'm not knocking SEO agencies, and I don't want to minimize the importance of technical SEO, but technical tweaks is not where you want to start your journey. If I had the choice between a technically perfect website from an SEO perspective and a website built in 2012 with really great content, meaning words on the page, I'd choose the latter every time, and so will Google. Trust me. To really move the needle, the best places to start investing your SEO energy are in your blog and your Google business profile. So, what about the technicals? What's all this? Like, how on earth did we get here where there is this misunderstanding about where to start from an SEO perspective? Well, it lives in good intentions. Let's step back and think about it. Google spends all of their money evolving a search algorithm that optimizes for human readability and actual real-world relevance. That algorithm that searches the web and presents you with the closest possible answer to your questions is their most valuable asset. That's why they're king, because their results mean the most to users in the real world. And it's not weighing those decisions on the meta keywords that you've added, the format of your URL, or the alt descriptions for your images. It's weighing its decision most on the actual content of the pages on your site that actually answer its user's query. That's what makes Google the best. Like I said, does technical SEO matter? Absolutely, but not nearly as much as the relevance of the content on your page to the question that's being asked by the person that's conducting the search. So where did the SEO checklist stuff come from? Okay, so 5-10 years ago, Google search algorithm wasn't as sophisticated as it is today. It did weigh technical effort and relevance based on much simpler variables. So like when I did SEO professionally back in the 2010s, you could use a very specific combination and count of keywords, with one in bold, of course, surrounded by a very specific combination of sentences, and you could win the SEO game. As long as your technicals were dialed in, you won. Search doesn't really work that way anymore, and it's not going to work that way again. Now, that said, is SEO auditing and technical on-page stuff a scam? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But the fundamentals are the content, and that's really where you should be focusing your energy. If you're spending money on an SEO agency, then hopefully you're doing so with a lot of really great content that they can boost, which they'll be amazing at, as opposed to doing so trying to tweak a very basic content-free zone. And here's the thing. When you think about search engine optimization, there are other things to take into account too. 2015, Google was much easier to game than it is today. Today, its algorithm is very, very focused on human readability. In 5 years, 2 years, 12 months, it could be completely different. You want to be sure that when you're doing what you're doing, you're future-proofing your SEO strategy as well. Ever heard of ChatGPT? It is very cool. You should definitely give it a shot. I put the link down at the bottom of your screen. Hopefully you can see it. Feels like I'm piloting a freaking 737 in here with all these different screens to look at. And it's poised to upend the SEO industry completely. Why is that? Well, as search algorithms improve, they will improve to optimize for human readability, not for a checklist of technical specs. Your average user doesn't care about your meta tags, and so as search engines get better, they're going to lean more towards what the average user prefers so that they have the best product. If you invest your time and energy in creating meaningful content that your community finds value from, you will be more successful and you will future-proof your SEO strategy. Your SEO will actually get better as the search engines improve because you're not trying to game the system. You're trying to provide the best answer to questions your customers might ask. On the contrary, if you're focused on technical specifications and your checklists are from a report that's spit out by a website auditing tool, you're going to spend a whole lot more time and a ton more money constantly reacting to adjustments in search results to try to game the newest evolution of a search algorithm. As time goes on, these adjustments' impact on your SEO standing will diminish as algorithms improve to optimize towards human readability. So building great content is the best way to go. And if you didn't hear me, content is king. So enough of the why, let's talk about the how. I want to set aside the Google Business Profile for today. At the beginning of this, I talked about Google Business Profile. It is important. We're going to get to it. We'll cover that next time. I want to talk about your blog. Exciting, I know. What are we trying to accomplish with this whole blog situation? The strategy goes like this. Google displays search results based on the initialism EAT. That stands for expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. In other words, whichever result Google thinks presents the most relevant response will be from a source it considers to be an expert on the subject, who has authority on the subject matter, and who's also shown to be a trustworthy source of that expertise and authority in the past. In Google search, results are essentially competing for the top spot in this EAT paradigm. Some searches are highly competitive and very valuable, like Ghost 15, for example. Unsurprisingly, Brooks is comfortably in the top spot for this search term. If I wanted to go to the top of the Google search results in this situation with the Ghost 15, I'd have to compete with the expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness that Brooks has established on the subject of the Ghost 15 to even be considered for this front page. That's not likely to happen anytime soon. Highly competitive keywords are good reference points, but terrible to try to compete for. And you'll hear me use the term orbit terms in a little bit to reference some of these highly competitive keywords that are still relevant to what you're trying to do. On the other hand, I searched for best places to run near Charlotte, and these are EAT paradigm owners for that keyword. And keep in mind, when I say keyword, what I mean is the words that are typed into the Google search. So it could be a keyword or a phrase. We just use the term keyword as a shortcut. Notice the top result was written in 2018. It belongs to an indexing site. That second result is an indexing site too, which means a place to look up info. So like Wikipedia would be an indexing site, for example. These are essentially bottom of the barrel search results to try and answer my question. A page full of indexing sites tells me that I can easily compete to be the dominant, expert, authoritative, trustworthy source for the best places to run near Charlotte. If you want to get a better idea of how this whole indexing sites as the bottom of the barrel thing works, Google a friend of yours with a relatively obscure name, and you'll see that it's basically just background checks websites trying to advertise to you. Same concept. So the key here is, when you're doing this exercise, the goal is to find specific questions that somebody might pose to Google with low competition in search results that might be relevant to your customer. The exercise is this: sit down with a piece of paper and draw 2 columns. Label one orbit terms or orbit topics, and label the second specific topics. Gather your employees at your store, your best customers, some friends, people who know your business and brand, whoever, and do a brainstorming session. What are the questions someone might type into Google if they were interested in the kinds of things that you can help them with? Orbit topics are big and competitive, but definitive enough that we should list them to get a broader idea of things that we can write about that could contribute to our authority in the domain. This will make sense in a second. I'm going to do an example, because otherwise it's just some guy babbling with 2 columns on the screen making no sense. I'm not going to do a running subject because I don't want to influence your creativity. So we're going to go with the pretend scenario that I'm a photographer in Boise, Idaho, and I want people to buy my services. Now, my natural inclination is to want to be the top search result when someone looks up photographer in Boise. Interestingly enough, that's every other photographer in Boise's inclination too. So I suspect that I'm going to have to compete pretty hard for photographer in Boise, but it's not totally out of reach. So I am going to drop it in my orbit topics list. So what about just photographer? Probably not good. Far too competitive. It'll cost me a lot of time and money and effort to compete there, and my customers may not be looking for just photographer anyway. So I'm going to leave that off the list entirely. Localizing search terms like photographer in Boise as opposed to just photographer will also help you reduce the competition and make it more likely that you'll be able to compete for top spot that some of those big orbit topics surround. But photographer in Boise is going to take some work to win unless you've been listed on Google for like 20 years, and some have. What are some other questions that people might be searching for? Not just photographers in Boise, Idaho. If I'm doing research on photography in the area, there are some other searches that I might do. What if, and one of the things to focus on is answering questions. So what if we wrote a blog post answering the question, how much do family photographers charge for portrait sessions in Boise, Idaho? Okay, that's way more specific. Interestingly enough, that's a much better plan to attack than the orbit topic on the big side. To craft the best piece of content for that, it'd be great to look around and find what other photographers are charging. You could break this down into detail. Freelance photographers, photography studios, etc. What are the different tiers of photographers in the area that do family portrait photography? Find out, get a reasonable average for what each one charges for a session. You might even pull other information in on topics like what kind of sessions do they run? Do they do it on location or in the studio? Does it have to be within a certain area? In other words, what are the things that impact the pricing? Get a thorough guide together to answer the question, how much do family photography portrait sessions cost in Boise, Idaho? Do that, rank for that search query, even though it's not every single person on the planet that might be searching for a photographer in the Boise area. The ones who are, and it's a very reasonable question to ask, will land on your topic. The authority on that subject will be you. And you just happen to be selling photography services. You, me, I've mixed up you and me, but you get what I mean. And how much does it cost is a pretty underserved topic to generally reference. Could be worth looking into. Obviously not how much do shoes cost, that's a pretty easy one, but it could be something to the effect of how much does it cost to get outfitted for a winter of running in Boise, Idaho? Just making things up. What's another one, trying to stay on topic here? How about what do family photographers in Boise typically, do they give you the copies on the digital side, or do they just give you the prints? Or how long does a senior photo session typically last? Or maybe what are the best locations in the Boise area for senior photos? You get the gist. I've got these very specific questions, all seem very reasonable, that I can create blog posts to answer in depth while referencing my orbit topic and establishing authority in the space and building up my standing in SEO results. It's a pretty straightforward process. And here's the cool part. In creating the content that goes with the specific topic questions that we just came up with, we keep that orbit topic in mind. So for us, it's photographer in Boise. Each of the specific topics will thoroughly answer the questions that I posed on my brainstorming session, my little mini one that, is kind of like what you'll do. But they will reference my orbit topic. You'll see me writing about photographer in Boise in the content that I'm explaining in my other specific topics. And by doing so, my authority on the orbit topic will rise in the eyes of the search engine. So over time, I'll begin to compete with the top results for photographer in Boise simply because I have become the authoritative author of content on the subject online. And it'll happen faster than you think. So once you've got an exhaustive list of specific topics or questions your potential customers might ask Google, actually go to Google and see what the competition looks like for those terms. Hopefully you guys can see my Google. Felt like George Bush saying that there. Let me move some of these panels around. The first thing that you should do is use incognito mode. Okay, if you're using Chrome. Regardless of what you're using, you should clear your browsing data. So I want to go in to all time and clear my data. And then I want to go to Google. And I want to click the three dots up here, go to more tools, choose developer tools to open up this big thing. I want to hard reload and empty cache. This clears everything out. The purpose behind this is I don't want any of my previous search history to have any impact on my keyword workshopping. Because if I went looking for something on the subject of photography earlier today, that would influence what Google sends back to me. So by clearing all that stuff out, we get it pretty solid, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say photographer in Boise and just look and see what it has. So, interestingly enough, there's some index pages, right? So these are all ads. And now I've got Tamara Kenyon photography at the top, Anna Gorin, and so on. And you can see, it's a reasonably competitive space, but it's something that is pretty doable. What I wanted to show you here, and I'm hoping that you can see it, is that there's some things that you can look at in these search results to help sort of prime the pump. Okay. So if I'm all out of ideas, I've written down all my keywords, I'm looking for other stuff to look at, I can go to Google and kind of do it backwards and play around. So I could say, okay, photographer in Boise is definitely an orbit topic that I want to cover. I can scroll down to this people also ask and see what other questions people ask. So is it normal to pay a photographer up front? Does Fiverr have photographers? Who is the number one photographer? That's a very interesting question. How much does a photographer cost in Florida? So I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. And so obviously my photographer in Boise isn't a localized search in the traditional sense. And so this, how much does a photographer cost in your area, would be a great search term, as I mentioned before. If I continue to scroll down, I will also see this area here. So these are other search terms that people who looked for photographer in Boise also entered into Google. So this can also kind of help me find other things that I might want to write about. The idea, again, is to create content so you become the authority on the subject. And a lot of this stuff is going to be orbit topics. So photographers near me, that's a tough one. That's a little bit more for the Google business profile conversation. Boise photographer senior pictures. There you go. Boise photography locations, maternity photographer. You get the idea. It gives you some things that you can sort of orbit around. And I can say, when is the best season for senior photos in Boise? Look, it's already suggesting stuff to me. Creepy. So here you go. The summer after your junior year apparently is it. And look at this. Jeremy Moyer Photography has got it locked. He's the guy, apparently. And you also see some more. What's the best month to take senior pictures, and so on. So you can kind of do it backwards. You can brainstorm with your crew, get some really good specific topics, some really good orbit topics, and then go and play around in Google a little bit, and you can do it the other way around and develop some additional specific topics or orbit topics that you think you, as a run specialty store who is unique in your own way, could answer in a unique way. So the last thing I want to leave you with, because I know we covered a lot, is the steps. So first, pick a specific topic. Once you've gone through this brainstorming session, once you've looked in Google and you see, what's super competitive and what's not, you can kind of prioritize by competitiveness, the lowest competition at the top of the list. Pick a specific topic. In this case, let's go with senior pictures in Boise, Idaho. Write a well thought out, authoritative article about it. So you really want to answer the question in a way that you would expect your customer to go, oh, wow, that's a lot of really great information. I can trust this source. Keep your orbit topic in mind and reference it from in the content. So, for example, if you are a run specialty store in Las Vegas, for example, you might want to mention run specialty retailers in Las Vegas or something to that effect, whatever your orbit term is when you're writing about your specific term. So that way it will contribute to your authority on that matter. And repeat weekly. And so if you can, write a blog once a week. And I know that seems like a lot. I will say that ChatGPT is pretty creepy when it comes to helping with choosing or starting to write. So maybe you go to ChatGPT and have it help you start. Getting started is always the hardest part. But if you can write a blog post that's 700 to 1,400 words once a week, and you're covering these specific topics, you will see your land value in the virtual world rise, and you will become more competitive for the keywords that you want to compete for. Your ads will be more effective. Your agency will have more to work with when it comes to optimizing from an SEO perspective when it does come time to do the technical stuff, and you'll be better for it. You'll know your customers better. As you build these pages, go into Google Analytics, once a week, once a month, whatever it is, and look and see which of the blog posts you've written are getting the most hits and the most engagement. And you'll be surprised at how much you learn about the people who are clicking on your site by the subjects that they engage with in your blog. You may actually be able to be a better marketer at the end of this while getting better SEO by learning more about the people who are interested in your brand. And it is going to be different for everybody. So the persona of the person who would find me on Google if I were Skinny Raven, for example, is going to be different than the persona of the person that would find me if I were a Palmetto Running Company, right? And so it's super important not only to localize those terms when you're thinking about it, but it's also important to try and personalize the sort of cultural / brand feel of things and optimize for that as well. I hope that this has been helpful. Keyword optimization is tough, but the blog is the answer. Start writing your blog and everything else will fall into place. There is a place for all SEO work, and it is a complicated subject, but hopefully this gets you a lot further than you might have been before. Next time, we're going to talk about your Google business profile and the things you need to make sure you're doing with that Google business profile to rock and roll. With a good blog, with consistent entries, some good keyword research, and a well dialed in Google business profile, you are in the top percentage of performers for online. And remember, 87% of your customers look online before they come into the store. Thanks so much. Appreciate you guys. For those of you who work with us, thanks for being part of the project. For those who don't,